Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of the Area 1 Planning Committee. My name is Councillor Dennis King and I shall be chairing the meeting this evening. For the benefit of those watching on our YouTube channel, members of the committee are present in the chamber and these members will be voting on the proposals this evening, of which we have two applications to consider. Other members of the council may be participating via MS Teams and can take part in any discussions and can ask questions but cannot vote. Your attention is drawn to agenda item 1, which sets out the guidance on how meetings will be conducted. We do have a good number of the public with us this evening, so I would ask you to indicate if you have not signed in this evening. Silence was the stern reply, so that's good. Thank you. I'm going to make you aware that there are no fire drills planned during this time of the meeting. And for the benefit of those in the meeting room, the fire alarm is a non-continuous bell and the exits are via the doors used at either end of the room. An officer on site will lead to any evacuation, but I stress there is no alarm scheduled this evening. So thank you very much. The Democratic Services Officer, Sally on the end here, will undertake a roll call of members in alphabetical order and ask councillors to confirm that they are present. Sally, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please can you confirm that you are present? Councillor King?
Present.
Councillor Upwell?
Present.
Councillor Barton?
Present.
Councillor Brage?
Present.
Councillor Clokey?
Present.
Councillor Cope?
Present.
Councillor Hoskins?
Present.
Councillor Mehmet?
Here.
Councillor Oliver?
Present.
Councillor Perry?
Present.
Councillor Pilgrim?
Present.
Councillor Rhodes? Tunstall?
Present.
We have 13 voting members present. Sorry, and just to say, we also have apologies from Councillor Hood.
Thank you. I'll ask the officers to introduce themselves, starting from this end, please.
Hello, Charlotte Maynell, Senior Planning Officer.
Hello, Josh Kwok, Development Management Team Leader.
Anna Parker, Development Manager.
Joy Ukadike, Head of Legal and Democratic Services.
Sally Wang, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. With regard to public speakers that will be speaking this evening, we have 3 nominated speakers for each application. The members of the public and or the agent that have registered to speak, the planning committee are present in the chamber, and in one case, a speaker is participating online. The speakers will be invited to speak at the appropriate time. The speaking time is limited to 3 minutes for each application that they speak on, and what will happen is we will call you forward. You will take your place in this position here. You will activate the microphone and speak directly to the members in the chamber, and you will be notified when your 3 minutes is up. So when we get to that point, that will be the arrangement. Thank you. Sally, you've mentioned that we have apologies from Councillor Hood. Do we have any others? Do we have any other apologies offered from the floor? Don't think so. So that's good. Thank you. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Members in the chamber are being asked if they have a declaration of interest for which the Democratic Services will be making a note. I think Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a declaration of other significant interest. For item 7, the applicant is the Diocese of Rochester, and I carried out some work for the diocese earlier in this year, not related to this application, but the advice from Joy and Adrian was that I declare an interest and withdraw from the meeting for that item, so I'll be doing that with your permission, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Noted. I'll move on to item 4, which is the minutes. I'd like your agreement to accept the minutes of the previous meeting, which was the 5th of September 2024, and also the supplementary minutes for the extraordinary meeting held 1 week ago on the 10th of October. Thank you so much. A slight digression when we come to item 5, which is the glossary and supplementary matters. Your attention is drawn to the glossary within the report attached for the meeting this evening, and also supplementaries, of which there are 2. The second supplementary was, in actual fact, the publication of the minutes for the extraordinary meeting, so we've dealt with that. The other one is notification to you of an appeal decision recently on a matter which was brought before Area 1. So basically, I'm making you aware of that and asking you have any comments to make on the inspector's report. Thank you. Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you, Chair. Just the question I had on the appeal decision. Obviously, I noticed there was conditions put forward by officers for it. There was quite a lot of discussion in the room on that agenda item when we were sort of taking a vote on it about a landscaping condition and how we all kind of felt that would, improve it to some degree. But there was no kind of recommendation by officers to put a landscaping condition on it. So I just wondered why that was.
Anna, can I ask you to clarify on that at all?
I wasn't expecting that question, but I presume the officer did a thorough report to defend the council's decision, and if we would have considered that the landscaping condition wasn't necessary on this case. We would have felt it wouldn't have met the tests.
Not sure about that, Chair, but it's done now, so.
Thank you. Moving on to the... Your pardon, Councillor Hoskins.
Thank you. Just wondered if I could come back on that, because many times we get written in reports, we didn't raise this as an issue last time, therefore we can't this time. Right, there's one coming up later this evening. Can we be sure that that will be covered in future then? That, if that, I know I wasn't at the meeting, I apologise for that, but didn't want to give you all COVID. But can we be sure that if another application comes through, we're not going to be bitten by that one because we haven't included it as a reason this time? Thank you.
I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. But I mean, I can go back and have a look at the officers, the council's case for the appeal statement, because it has been a while since I've read it, and I can come back to any members on any questions about that.
Thank you, Hannah. An observation, I think the responsibility is twofold. If we bring up a legitimate request for a condition which is voted on, there is a reasonable expectation that it would be included. And I guess it is required of all of us that we check the minutes of the meeting to make sure that that condition is included. So if this one has gone under the wire, I think we've got a wee lesson to learn. Councillor Apple.
Just wondering if it's because we chose to refuse it. So we didn't ask for a condition to be added because we weren't approving it. So that's where it's fallen through the cracks, I think, perhaps, because there was a lot of discussion about landscaping, and if that could be done, we might all feel differently about it. So I don't know what else we could have done because we refused it.
I think that's a good piece of negative logic that actually works. Yeah, fair point. Thank you. I'd like us to move on to the first application, which is 111 Douglas Road, Tunbridge. And I'd like the officer to present it. And I think, Josh, you're going to do the presentation, aren't you? So thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to number 111 Douglas Road, Tunbridge. Site boundary is shown in the red line boundary in the location plan provided. The site is currently occupied by a two-story detached house with a spacious side and rear garden and a single attached garage. There are two pear trees to the side of the house as shown in the existing site layout. It's over here where the cursor is. The site is in the built confine of Tunbridge, where development plan anticipates most development in the borough to take place. The proposal is for the erection of a two-story site extension to create a dwelling. So at the rear of the dwelling, there will be two new dormers, one for each house, the existing one as well as the new one. The proposal will result in the loss of two pear trees that I've briefly mentioned, currently presented to the side of the house. This is shown in the proposed layout as well. As you can see over here, the red circle. There will be 3 parking spaces in total, two of which for existing house and one for the new dwelling, as indicated where the cursor is. So that is a photo taken from the front of the house. That's the property under consideration, and that's the side garden. And the 2 pear trees to be lost is over here, which is adjacent to existing vehicular access, serving all the houses forming part of the cul-de-sac development. This one is taken from the other side of the vehicular access. As you can see, those are the trees to be lost as a result of the development. That is the side elevation of the property concerned. As you can see, there isn't any sort of consistent building line in this part of Douglas Road. And this one is taken further away from the site. So as you can see, that's the red line where the photo was taken. And again, that is where the vehicular access is. And then the house is basically behind the trees. So this one is taken from the access point. That's the side of the house, and then with the garden enclosed by brick walls. There is a car parking area adjacent to it, which currently serve the properties concerned, and is also within the ownership of the applicant, as confirmed by the applicant, and also certified. So this is taken from another angle again. Adjacent to the white van, there is a garage, again belonging to the applicant, which will be retained for car parking. So these are some examples of the houses in this neighborhood. You can see the architectural style vary a little bit, including the materials, roof form, and also this the type of houses as well. You've got a mix of semi-detached, detached, and well, there is no terrace houses, but yes, there is a mix of house type in this location. That is the front elevation, side and rear elevation of the houses, one of which is existing, but would involve some alterations to this roof form. At the moment, it's pyramid roof, whereas the proposed one would have a barn hip roof. The house will be constructed with a mix of brick, color render, and concrete tiles. So that's the internal layout of the building. The new bit is annotated in yellow, so there is a clear distinction in terms of which part being original and which part being an extension. So that's where the cursor is the new dwelling. And there will be 2 dormers serving 1 bedroom each in the roof of the houses. So in terms of the principal development, the site is in a sustainable location where a proposal for residential development can be supported. In absence of a 5-year housing land supply, as members would be aware of, the most relevant policies for assessing the proposal is currently out of date. So the tilted balance is therefore engaged. This means, in practice, planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The proposal to form a pair of semi-detached houses is not considered to detract from the character of the site surroundings, where there is, according to the photos, a variety of house types, including semi-detached houses. The proposed layout and roof form would be sympathetic to those of the houses in this neighborhood and is therefore acceptable from a visual amenity perspective. Appropriate spacing will be maintained between the new and surrounding houses to avoid a significant adverse impact on the living conditions of the neighbors. New house would also meet the NDSS, the Nationally Described Space Standard, which means it's going to provide the future occupiers a good standard of amenity. There would also be adequate outdoor amenity space to serve the current proposal, which is for a 2-bed house compared to the previous refuse scheme that comprises 5 bedrooms. Other than a new vehicle access on Douglas Road, which I'm going to show you, So other than a new vehicle access on Douglas Road, where the cursor is, the access arrangement of the sites remain largely the same. Adequate visibility display from the cul-de-sac itself could be achieved subject to a boundary treatment condition, which is detailed in the decision notice. Well, no, in the committee reports of this application. The site is in a sustainable location where the requirement for off-street parking is generally lower. So the proposed layout would meet the adopted parking standard. Again, unlike the previous one, it would achieve the required standard for a house of this size. The proposal will result in the loss of 2 pear trees. Tree officer has been consulted in this instance. He has concluded that the trees concerned are of limited public amenity value, so they do not warrant protection of a TPO. A like-for-like replacement for these trees would not be possible given the physical constraint presented on site. However, compensation enhancement could be achieved through a landscaping condition, again recommended in the committee reports. Other planning considerations are not mentioned. Other material consideration that has not been mentioned are included in the dedicated report, included in the committee report. Sorry. To conclude, the proposal would adequately address the reason for refusal set out in the decision notice of the previous planning applications. There is no harm significant enough to clearly demonstrate outweigh the benefits of the proposal. For these reasons, officer put forward a positive recommendation in this instance. Chair.
Thank you. We'll now move to the speakers on this application. Something that I may have omitted before, but I'll just make clear that when we hear from speakers, they will each have 3 minutes, but they will not play any other part in the discussions after they have participated in that way. So I'm calling upon Mr. Sunil Sharma. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sunil Sharma, and I'm the neighbor of property application for 109 Douglas Road. We have raised objection to planning request for a few reasons, and I think some of them it has been laid out in the previous introduction about this application. So the first one, I will go with the priority, which concerns me as individual the most. The 111 property overlooks to my garden, is 109, and raising any building above the first floor will have our privacy being compromised, and this property so far we have been there for many, many years, and it has been wonderful property to live in a cul-de-sac area, and also maintaining the decorum and everything. Having this development will create building out of the proportion to rest of the houses surrounding that. And when the roof, which is the loft roof, get raised, and it significantly look bulky, so the appearance is compromised. And also, it will, as I said before, it will overlook into our garden, and that privacy is in question there. The other important part was the parking. It is very, it's a cul-de-sac area, and the property, when it was built, it was to the car dimensions at that point in time. But now with the modern new vehicles coming in, they are much more wider, bigger. So maneuvering the cars, that area will also be difficult. This is a property which is very close to the schools. Well, good schools around, and in the pickup and drop-off period, very crowded, and having additional accommodation will give, can say, more traffic or more.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Elizabeth Williams, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm speaking today as Elizabeth Williams, as one of the owners of 105 Douglas Road, but also reflecting the views of those of 106, 107 and 113. And I would also point out to you that there were 11 households in the immediate vicinity who objected to this planning application. We would like to raise a number of points to the Planning Committee, which were pointed out in the proposal, but which we feel are not reflected or are inaccurate in the report to the Planning Committee. So first of all, in relation to the parking provision, the committee report states that the provision of parking for the new property will utilise one of the existing parking spaces for 111. That's page 35.6.43 of your report. This is factually incorrect. The existing parking space for 111 is proposed to be incorporated into the garden for the new property. The proposed parking space for the new property will be created by taking out part of the access road for the properties of 105, 107, and 109. Also, as the proposal plan has not used the correct boundary lines, as you can see on the plan in front of you on the screen, more than half of the proposed new space for 111 at the front of the property coming onto Douglas Road is actually within land belonging to 113. And looking at the ground outside 111, we would suggest that there is insufficient length to put in a parking space of the necessary length. The line on that plan is a straight line. It is not a straight line under the normal boundaries and on the ground as you see it. We also have objections based on design. The committee report states that the proposed dwelling is 5 metres in width. That's page 1, section 1.2, whereas the proposer's plan shows that the dwelling is going to be 6 metres in width. This inaccuracy calls into question the outdoor amenity calculation at section 1.5. Committee report has stated throughout that this is a 2-storey development, but in fact, because they are going up into the roof and putting in large dormer windows, this actually is a 3-storey development and is completely out of character with the existing properties. It will really stand out on the curving road of Douglas Road. The committee should also note that the applicant's proposal document references the design as being commensurate with Area B1, 19th century cottages, and suggests rendering it rather than the area in which it is actually located, which is Area I, clustered cul-de-sac. This report goes on to be promulgated throughout the report, and there are no other properties within the area where this proposal comes that are designed to be rendered. They are all tiled.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Thank you. I'm now going to call Mr. Ricketts.
Chair, members, good evening. You will see that your officer has recommended approval for this application, and I would urge you to support this recommendation. This application is being heard by committee because 2 trees are required to be removed. However, as explained in the committee report, Council's tree officer has confirmed that neither tree is suitable for a tree preservation order, while previous planning decisions have established that the loss of trees is not unacceptable. The tree removal is therefore not a sound planning basis to withhold permission. This application is exempt from biodiversity net gain requirement, being a self-built development. However, condition 4 does require the applicant to submit detailed landscaping information to compensate for the tree loss. I do acknowledge the discrepancy just mentioned within the planning statement that referenced the incorrect character sub-area, but I can assure you that in developing the scheme, we have considered the area holistically and sought to avoid any adverse impact upon the street scene experience. Whilst I apologise for this error, the design of the proposed development, noting its size, roof forms and materials, is clearly appropriate to the local character. Your planning officer agrees with this. I would also like to pick up paragraph 6.33, referencing the dormer windows that is typically does not require planning permission that was not mentioned earlier. In respect of parking, the report confirms we are fully policy compliant, both in terms of the size and amount of parking spaces. A condition that requires the submission of refuse details to facilitate the safe collection and storage of rubbish has been included, and we are satisfied that the plans are accurate. Finally, the Council will be aware of emerging planning policy changes, including a potential revision to housing targets, with Tunbridge and Morley expecting to receive a substantial uplift in their requirement. It is therefore important that the Council take a positive approach delivering new housing in locations within urban confines. To conclude, the proposed dwelling is a well-designed and in a highly suitable location to support a new dwelling. The new house will fit well into the character and setting of the area and make maximum use of an urban site. The proposed development provides suitable amenity levels in an urban context for future occupiers and will continue to respect the amenities of all neighbouring occupants. In the absence of any sound planning reason to refuse, I would urge members to support their officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ricketts. I'm now going to go to the local member before we refer back to the officer with regard to any points that he would like to raise. So, Councillor Pilgrim.
Thank you, Chair. This application is the latest in a series of attempts to squeeze another house onto this constricted plot. It will leave both properties on the site with inadequate gardens, and there will be inevitable loss of biodiversity from the loss of the 2 trees which are a prominent feature on the corner of the road here. The landscape officer has not placed adequate value on the pair of trees here, which is not altogether surprising considering they failed to recognise the importance of the copper beech at the other application that this committee is considering tonight. A significant consideration of tree protection is amenity, which is described as the pleasantness of a place. Visual amenity refers to the pleasantness of the landscape, to which trees obviously contribute. Although amenity is subjective, it is hard to imagine that these trees would occupy a more prominent position considering they are both tall as the house itself. There is a fundamental and reoccurring problem that the landscape officer refers to in future management in this report, which is irrelevant. The previous refusal referred to uncertainty over the future of these trees, and this one is explicit that they will be removed with the blessing of our own officer. Trees are, however, a consideration for policy SQ1. The suggested condition 4 relating to landscaping cannot be met. We require specific details of the trees that can reach maturity in such a constricted area. The gardens of each new residence are simply too small to sustain replacement native trees of a size which will compensate for the loss of these two. I suggest that the application is turned down as it is in conflict with policy SQ1. Proposal for development must reflect the local distinctiveness, conditions and sensitivity to change in the local character areas as defined in the Charter, the Character Area Appraisal. All new development should protect, conserve and where possible enhance the character and local distinctiveness of the area, including its historical and architectural features and the prevailing level of tranquility. The distinctive setting and relationship between the pattern of settlement, roads and the landscape, as well as the urban form and important views. The proposed identical two cottage terrace is more in keeping with the Victorian housing to the east, yet it does not fit well in the specific location. The new building would impose on the street scene, while the pear trees currently help break up the built form of housing along this part of Douglas Road, contradicting policy SQ1. I believe that this application alters the impression of the character of the area by introducing a close boarding fencing, which is inconsistent with the neighbourhood's character, where boundary treatments are typically brick walls. The surrounding community is characterised by clustered cul-de-sacs, as identified in Area I1 of the Tunbridge Character Area Supplementary Planning document. This new building resembles the terraced housings nearby, which detracts from the area's distinctiveness. If this application is permitted, I would like to propose adding a condition that limits parking to designated spaces only. This measure is essential to prevent the ongoing issue of vehicles parking on the grassed areas, which has become a frequent problem at this location on Douglas Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pilgrim. I'm going to give the officer a chance to take breath and respond on any of the points that have been raised so far.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Chair. In terms of the loss of the two trees, we have given careful consideration in terms of the potential of retaining these trees, and we have also afforded some weight to the amenity value of it. But the applicant has provided an arboricultural impact assessment. They have also objectively evaluated the value of the trees concerned, and they have professionally judged the trees as being category B. And then the tree officer have also advised me under the current British standard in relation to trees is now category C instead of category B. And ordinarily category C tree is not worthy of protection and therefore it's not normally worthy of a tree protection order. That's not to say it's not going to have an impact on biodiversity. We acknowledge that. But we do believe on balance, having regard to other planning material considerations and including the potential of using planning conditions such as landscaping scheme as a way to mitigate the development impact, we feel on balance, it will be hard to substantiate a reason solely on the basis of the loss of trees. Together with the planning history, the site was never refused on the ground of loss of trees, except inadequate information under the most recent refusal. Back in 2021, there was a planning refusal for a pair of semi-detached houses that would result in loss of those two trees. And at the time, there wasn't any mention in the report saying the loss of trees would be harmful. So it would be difficult under those circumstances for us to come up with this new reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to comment on the parking condition?
Sorry, coming on to the parking issue or concern, we have just electronically measured drawings provided by the applicants. We can confirm that it's compliant with the relevant standard being 2.5 by 5 meters in terms of parking space. And we can also confirm the proposed new driveway along Douglas Road is 3 meter wide.
Regarding the parking condition, we wouldn't be able to put a condition on to stop someone parking on grass. I mean, that would not be reasonable. We've taken away permitted development rights on this case. Yeah, we are taking away permitted development rights, but to stop someone parking on a lawn, that is out. We can't physically stop that or enforce that.
Councillor Hoskins.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to the trees relates back to what I was saying earlier on about not using a condition. It says in the tree officer's report that we couldn't mention trees as a reason for refusal because we hadn't done so in the past, which is why I made that comment earlier on. Also, I understand, I might be wrong, but I don't think the earlier applications were going to lose the trees, so therefore that wouldn't have been a condition, would it? That might be worth thinking about for future applications. The other question I was going to ask is, when is a study not a bedroom 3?
Thank you, Councillor Hoskins. Noted, and we'll come to that. Thank you. Councillor Cope.
Thank you. I just wanted to check, following what Mrs. Williams said about the accuracy of where the parking space would be, whether that is from 111 Douglas Road or whether it is taking some of the access to some of the neighbouring properties, because I'm now unclear, and I would just like to know the accuracy of that. Thank you.
Councillor Clokey.
Just following up on that point, I gather it may not be down to us to resolve the dispute around where exactly the boundary lies, but would I be right in saying that because of condition 6 that's proposed, if that parking space as specified isn't developed, then the development can't be occupied? It's a requirement for the occupation that they do actually build it as it is there. So if they don't, if that doesn't happen because the land is disputed, presumably the whole scheme fails.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. They would be in breach of the if they're in breach of that condition, because it says that it has to be submitted in the vehicle layout, so that would be required before they occupy, otherwise they would be in breach of that. Josh, did you have any comments on the tree from the previous application? Because I think that did go.
Yes. With your permission, Chair, can I share the drawings previous? So just for members' information, this drawing was submitted as part of the 2021 application that was refused, and that involved a pair of semi-detached houses. As you can see over here, is slightly lower in terms of height compared to the existing house. And as you can see, where the 2 trees are at the moment, it basically it overlaps with one of the house, so it would result in a removal of the trees, but that was not mentioned as a concern, or at least not referred to as a reason for refusal. So that's why it could be a bit difficult to now sustain a reason on that.
Thank you. A couple of points which I think we may have passed by. I think the point that Councillor Hoskins raised was regard to the trees. But the officer confirmed that that was addressed by the classification of the trees as category 3. And the other point, which I'd like to confirm, and the other point was, I think, what's the distinction between a study and a bedroom? If you could address those 2 points, thank you.
So in relation to tree category, the applicant submitted agricultural impact assessment indicates the two trees concerned being category B. But there has been a recent change to the tree classification standard. Is currently out for consultation. I think from recollection, it's just expired. But if the new standard is to be applied in this case, it would have been category C trees. So that's clarification in relation to the tree category. In relation to access road, as Councillor Coope has mentioned, access road and car parking. So we are aware there is some dispute about the owner, well, not the ownership, but the right of use of a area adjacent to an existing car park. However, the area under consideration or in dispute is within the red line boundary, which the applicant has submitted a certificate confirming is owned by himself. So officers have no reason to dispute or to question as to why the site should not be belonging to the applicant. And we have not got any counter evidence to demonstrate it's not owned by the applicant. So that has not been investigated further for this reason. And in relation to study and bedroom, a bedroom could be classified as a bedroom if it meets the NDSS standard. So if it is below the NDSS standard, then it could not be considered as a bedroom. However, if applicant want to use a bedroom as a study, then that's up to them. And there is no restrictions under the planning rules to control the use of any room within it. And it wouldn't be reasonable or enforceable to actually control the use of those rooms using plan conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rhodes.
Chairman, thank you. Please could I be shown on the screen the existing front elevation from Douglas Road, as close as you can get to the front of the house, and the proposed resulting elevation, again from the front. Secondly, I have not heard here tonight, Chairman, a valid reason to turn this building down. Therefore, I would encourage the local members to ensure that the recommendations before us cover everything that they need it to cover, because we can put them on, but not afterwards. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, with your permission, I'll show the existing elevation of the house and also the proposed elevation for comparison.
Please.
So this is the existing elevation of the house, and as you can see, a measurement has been made in relation to the height of the building, and I can confirm the height of the building, proposed and existing, remain identical. So in terms of the building height, at the moment it's 8.35 meters, and the proposal one is also 8.35. So that is the proposed elevation of the dwellings. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you, Chair. I have some issues with this application. I'm not convinced that the way to address our housing shortfall is by sort of squeezing houses into areas that were, you know, originally master planned to be sort of landscaping when the estate was originally built. In my view, there are sort of a small number of changes that could have been made or could have been sought before the application got here that would have quite significantly improved this application. For example, we're losing all of that sort of nice green, landscaping area. There's going to be a closed fence coming right up to the edge of the road that goes down the sides of those houses. Now, if at the very least that fence was set in, a little bit, you could have put the replacement trees on the outside. You could have had some hedging. It would have been such a hard edge. So at the moment, you're going from nice lawn and landscaping to big closed boarded fence. So to me, it's not necessarily about the trees, but it's a kind of a general character point, putting those replacement trees within the private garden of someone's house, they're not really going to establish themselves because the owners aren't going to want them to. So I don't really see it as sort of sufficiently compensating for what's there at the moment. I agreed with the local resident about render not really being in keeping with this part of the area. 113 from the looks of things has got tile hanging. It would have been much easier to put that on, and that would have sort of been in keeping with the area. Render, ages quite poorly as a material. So again, that to me would have been an improvement that would have been, much nicer to see. But my main question, Chair, the report discusses biodiversity net gain. And it says that it's exempt on the basis of it being a self-build. But I've had a good look at the conditions. There seems to be no mechanism to secure this as a self-build. Obviously, it's a kind of already designed, so it's not clear to me who's kind of designing and putting the input into it, which is one of the key requirements of self-build. But as I see it, if we grant planning permission tonight, there's absolutely nothing stopping them from selling it tomorrow to anyone else, in which case they would have skirted around the requirements to provide biodiversity net gain. So I can't really see anything on this that suggests it is actually a self-build, and it just appears to be a bit of a ruse to get around these requirements. But I'd be very interested to hear from officers on that. Thank you, Chair.
Would you address those points, please?
Thank you, Chair. On the point about biodiversity net gain, the applicant is required to demonstrate at the validation stage as to how they have involved in the design of the current proposal. And then this information has been checked by the case officer of this application. It has been agreed that the proposal would fulfill the meaning of self-built, and therefore has been given exemption on that basis. The council does not currently have a procedure in place or mechanism in place to ensure the self-built being as a self-built in perpetuity, whereas some council might have it, especially those SIL council with community infrastructure levy, because that's already built into that mechanism. This council does not have a SIL procedure, so that's why at the moment we don't have a mechanism in place to secure the long-term future of it being a self-built.
Any other questions? Councillor Atwell.
Thank you. Just a quickie. We were hearing about this overlooking Garden of 109. Can you show me where that is on the plan, please?
So 109 is where the cursor is.
Okay. With the garden
111, 109.
Yeah.
And then moving forward.
107.
That's right.
So that's 109 with the garden.
That's right.
Behind.
And it's worth noting the host dwelling is set at a right angle. So the side elevation of 109 actually faced toward the rear elevation of 111. So it's an angle relationship. And just for your information, we have measured the depth of the garden currently presented at the rear of 111. That's 10 meter, which would not normally be acceptable, but because of this angle relationship, it was accepted as part of the original construction of the estate.
And sorry, and the distance from the new build to the side of 109, does 109 have windows on the side?
Through you, Chair. So in relation to the depth of separation distance between 109 and the new house, except the garage, which is shown here where the cursor is, that's the single garage. Except this bit, the separation distance will remain the same.
And are there windows on the side of 109? Will 109's windows now be, head on to the dormer? But the new one's going. Yeah, no. Thank you. Yeah, street view, very useful.
So this is the side elevation of number 109. So as you can see, that's the garage that I've just mentioned. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Mehmet.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for letting me come back. I don't agree with any of that, I'm afraid. You're saying that there's no mechanism that council can put in place to guarantee a house that's claiming to be a self-build is actually delivered as a self-build. That means that anyone can apply for planning permission for a house, say that it's a self-build, get the permission, and then sell it the next day to someone else, and it won't be a self-build. I know for a fact that there are authorities in Surrey that actually put conditions on to kind of say it must meet the definition of self-build. Usually it's a 3-year period, at least they have to occupy it. But this just isn't right to me, and it should at the very least have been delivering biodiversity net gain. And there's nothing in here to say that it's going to be self-build, so that it will just be avoided and it could be sold tomorrow. The planning permission runs with the land. I just fundamentally disagree with that. I think it's wrong, and I think we probably shouldn't even be deciding on this application without some further advice on that. I would lean towards deferral, Chair, but yeah.
We do for every application which is self-build, we do register them, and they're monitored by the department. The policy department will have a list of all the applications which we have self-build on. We are strengthening our, we're all learning about biodiversity net gain and the exemptions, and we are strengthening them on new applications which come in. It is ticked self-build on the application form, and we have required them to submit a statement, as the officer has said, to say why it has been self-build, and that is being taken forward, and we have accepted. I mean, it is known, I think, that self-build can be potentially being used as a loophole, but that's government guidance is getting strengthened on that all the time, and local authorities are learning regarding this aspect as well. But at the moment, we will be letting the policy team know that this is a self-build application. It will be recorded that way.
Councillor Hoskins.
Thank you for letting me come back. I am clearly a layman. I don't understand what a self-build is. Does that mean that the householder is building it for themselves to use? In which case, why isn't it an extension? Or is he building it as a separate dwelling? In which case, it's going to be sold and be a separate dwelling. It doesn't, to me, in my very simple mind, it doesn't make sense at all.
You can read the self-building definition, which we're just getting up for.
Okay, whilst that's happening, I'll come to Councillor Parry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm just slightly concerned. The second speaker called into question the accuracy of some of the boundaries, and Anna mentioned it in her question, and I don't think it was really answered. I mean, are the boundaries that we're shown on this accurate? And if they're not, how can we possibly make a decision if they are questionable? Thanks.
The officer has checked the plans, and he's been checking what issues have been brought up and measuring as we have gone along, and we haven't found any discrepancies at the moment. Boundary issues are like they're private, boundary are private issues. But all the measurements we can see are accurate from us checking again now.
Just going to add, the boundary issues are not material planning considerations. That's not something we consider as that, and there's government guidance on that.
Shall I read the self-build definition? Self-build and custom house building covers a wide spectrum from projects where individuals are involved in managing or the construction of their home from beginning to end, to projects where individuals commission their home, making key design and layout decisions that the home has been built ready for occupation. So that's why we've been asking for a statement of how they've been involved in building and designing the house.
Once more.
Apologies, Chairman. So there's a legal definition, Self-Build and Custom House Building Act. And what it excludes, which I think is important that we haven't covered, is it does not include the building of a house on a plot acquired from a person who builds the house wholly or mainly to plans or specifications decided or offered by that person. So what that means is if this plot was to be sold, The design is already pre-agreed. It's set there. Someone else would come and build it. They can't build it as a self-build because they're not inputting into the design. It's already been set by this permission. So that's the issue at hand. If it's sold on, it's not a self-build. The design is already set. It's excluded from the definition of self-build, and then it should be abiding by diversity net gain. So that is my issue. I just don't think we can, we can approve this without skirting around the biodiversity net gain issues, and we shouldn't be doing that. Thank you.
Councillor Cope.
Thank you. I'd just like to pick up on Councillor Hoskin's point. I don't understand how you could possibly live in two. Like, why is it not just an extension if it is a self-build for them to live in? I'm really unclear. Sorry.
I think they're intending to live. If it's a self-build, they're intending to live in it. Into the house. That's what they would be doing. They've had design input into it.
Councillor Hoskins.
To be a pain, but in that case, why isn't there a linking door so you can get from one side to the other? That's just a nonsense. You can't live in two separate dwellings. Well, I suppose you can, but it seems a bit daft. If you're building an extension, you're building an extension, and therefore you're applying for an extension, not a separate dwelling. And this is a separate dwelling.
Councillor Parry.
I'm just wondering whether it's possible that they could move into the new place that they've bought and sell the one that was already there, and that would still satisfy all the rules, and possibly that's maybe what they're intending, or am I completely out wrong here?
Well, by declaring it being a self-build, the applicant basically suggests to us that they're intending to live in that new dwellings, and it's not there is no requirement for them to explain to us how they're going to deal with the house they are currently living in. So yes, it's their intention to live in that property as their primary residence.
Sell the original part of it, and it would still qualify.
Yes, hypothetically they can. Yes.
Thank you. I do share the members' confusion in some ways, because declaring something as self-built doesn't mean to say it's going to be lived in by the person that built it themselves. It would seem to me there is no guaranteed linkage between the two. So it does seem a grey connection, and also with regard to the BNG, there does appear to be a loophole, but I'm not sure that we're in a position to plug that hole. Councillor Atwell.
Thank you very much. I was just wondering, I don't know whether we have this ability, but I think as Councillor Mehmet said, do we have an opportunity to defer? Because it seems to me that we've got the wrong area described here, B1 instead of I1. It seems that we have 5 metres instead of 6 metres. I understand that the boundary issue isn't a material reason to refuse planning permission, but it's still something that's up in the air. And it feels as if some of these conditions we're putting in that says, yes, you can build it, but you can't move in until this and this and this has happened. What happens is somebody just comes back and gets it altered at a later date because it's already built. We're not going to make them knock it down. We've got this issue with self-build. Looking at the report, it says obviously a 2-storey is the character of the area, and this is a 3-storey, although it's not going up in height. I don't know what our abilities are to do that. Are we able to defer and ask for those things to be corrected? Also, it sounds like you're saying that the categorisation for trees is a bit up in the air at the moment. Just having read the ones that there are at the moment, I would say these are clearly B. But I think what you're telling me is there's a new set of categories coming up, but they're not quite there yet. So it feels like there's quite a few moving parts here. I don't know. Are we able to do that? Is that within our power to say, let's get these things corrected and then go again? Or is that...
We can defer it. You can defer. However, I think like the corrections that you mentioned about the character area, I think they're more in the applicant statement. I think they're correct in the committee report. It does refer to I in the committee report. So officers have assessed it under the correct part of the Tunbridge action plan. I think that's correct. We have measured the plans for the discrepancies, the parking spaces. I mean, we could get it up and show you that they meet the standards, if that would help.
So it's okay that the applicant has got these things wrong because we've
assessed it under the right. We have assessed it under the right part, yeah.
But we believe the statement about self-build. I'll leave it there.
In summation, I think that we have to have legitimate grounds for deferral. We've addressed the condition that Councillor Pilgrim raised and said that that isn't planning consideration. We've discussed the boundary issues, and the officers have addressed the fact that they say that the boundaries are accurate in terms of how they are allowed to measure them and how they can define them. The issue of the self-build, I'll read you something. That, in considering whether a home is a self-build or custom-built home, relevant authorities must be satisfied that the initial owner of the home will have primary input into the final design and layout. I mean, whether or not you like that definition, that's what apparently is the definition. And what we've heard tonight is that the officers are satisfied. So I'm not clear on this particular basis. I'll come to you. What the fundamental reasoning would be for a deferral. Councillor Clokey.
If I'm understanding Councillor Mehmet's point around self-build correctly, his concern is if we were to grant planning permission, there would be nothing stopping the property being sold to someone else and then the building work being done. It wouldn't then meet the self-build definition, but there's nothing that we could do about that. So my question here would, and that would affect the biodiversity net gain requirement or otherwise, my question here would be, would it be possible to put a condition on that says if it's sold before construction work starts, then a biodiversity net gain requirement would apply? I suppose you'd have to provide it off-site or something, but is that possible?
I'll hold that point because it sounds quite a good one to me. Councillor Mehmet.
I see what officers think. My feeling is that it wouldn't be possible because we don't know what the biodiversity net gain loss is. We don't know where it can be provided. You would need to know those things up front. There are examples of conditions you could put on to guarantee it being self-build. The requirement would be that they would live in the property for 3 years, but obviously we don't know whether that's acceptable to the applicant or not. I suspect conveniently it probably won't be. I strongly feel that this advice is wrong. There's no mechanism ensuring that it's self-build. This is just a way around it. There isn't a loophole if we do things properly. If we apply the conditions, possibly legal agreement, whatever, we need to look at this. I don't want to have these being sort of slipping through without following, it's the BNG is a legal requirement. So I think we should be deferring on that. And while, that's being looked into, can come back to the next meeting and maybe we can also get some design changes as well. So I would strongly say we should not be approving this until the position on self-build and BNG is kind of looked into in more detail and we've got proper advice on it.
Second that proposal.
Well, I want just to say about coming back with design ideas. We do have the non-amendment policy, which would not allow us to redesign the property. And to say the self-build, we've gone back and challenged self-build cases to them to put in a statement, say that it is self-build and how they've inputted. So that has been done.
Thank you. My concern is we have to be very clear what we're asking for the deferral to achieve and on what basis it would come back and satisfy the committee to be looked at again based on the principles of the recommendation that's before you tonight. I am not clear what those grounds for a deferral actually are. other than the fact that we've heard that the definition of self-build is somewhat spurious, and that is an apparent loophole for avoiding the biodiversity net gain. So if we could be clear, if someone's going to put forward a recommendation for a deferral, I'd like it to be clear that there are firm grounds for that deferral. Councillor Barton.
Thinking back to our biodiversity net gain training, I believe all of the requirements were very strong recommendations. But one of the questions that came up at the end of that training from all of us was, well, this law has no teeth. And I hope I'm right in thinking that this wasn't the lack of biodiversity net gain wasn't a reason for turning down an application, was it? We were told we couldn't use that as a reason for refusing planning permission. So even if it weren't a self-build, even if it were a custom build, I don't think we could turn it down on the grounds of lack of biodiversity net gain. The law doesn't have enough teeth for us to require that. I'd appreciate confirmation from the officers of that. That's me recalling our biodiversity net gain training. It's not something I'm an expert in.
Biodiversity is a requirement for all application apart from applications which are exempt. And there are a number of exemptions, meaning that, like, for example, householders are exempt, self-builds are exempt, applications which are considered like de minimis in the sense that they cover less than 25 square metres of habitat, they're exempt, so they don't have to put in the biodiversity net gain plan. So what happens is when an application is validated at the moment, if it doesn't meet any of the exemptions, then a matrix is put in which assesses the site and what can be gained, and you can then get biodiversity on site or off site, or statutory credits, for example. So we have a policy here that we on site first. But then we go to, for applications with biodiversity, we then go to KCC, who will then look at the matrix and then advise us if it meets it or potentially can meet it through the submission of a biodiversity net gain plan, which is it's a condition which is put on automatically on consents, and we do this via an informative, which then requires them to submit a new matrix and the biodiversity net gain plan showing showing the 10%.
Right, Councillor Mehmet, I'll let you back in again, but I think if you're going to propose a recommendation for deferral, we need some specifics.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think we should be deferring to seek advice on whether a mechanism can be imposed to guarantee that it would be a self-built dwelling as it's submitted. It's, that's the basis that the developer is saying it will be, but we need a mechanism to secure that. And I think we need to defer so we can get proper advice on whether we can impose a mechanism to make sure that happens, because there is no loophole. It's wrong to say that it's a loophole, that it's not mandatory, that you can get around it. You can't. It has to be self-build. If it's not self-build, it has to be BNG. So that's the basis of deferral. We need to understand whether we can impose a mechanism on it just to make sure that happens. That's my main concern. I think, look, the design changes, if it's a no amendment policy, I don't particularly agree with that, but that's not the principal issue at hand. So is that clear enough for you, Chair?
So it's specifically a deferral on the basis to see if a mechanism can be defined to ensure that self-build is a firm condition. And
to ensure that it meets the definition of self-build. Yeah, a mechanism to ensure that it does what it says it does, essentially by condition or whatever.
Well, a definition that we've got, which says that it has to satisfy the officers that it is a self-build. So I think it's a loop in terms of trying to find regulations which may or may not exist. But I understand the definition that you're offering. And I think Councillor Hoskins would. Okay.
Oh yeah, sorry. I was just going to read. Oh, sorry. Just going to go back to the point of the self-build and the fact that Hannah has mentioned a couple of times that she's received a statement. And it does say in the regulations that, obviously you need, officers need to be satisfied. And I was just wanting to pull up that section again to read that part. So I've just gone into the MPP, the national plan, the guidance, the government guidance on this, talks about the self-build and custom build applications, and it explains what you must do to qualify for the exemptions. But at the end of the day, we've been provided with that information. That's what we have in front of us. But I can understand if you feel like you don't have enough information at this meeting to determine the application, and you feel that for that reason you wish to defer so you can get further information. I know that Councillor Mehmet has mentioned Surrey having had conditions in place, and obviously we know what Councillor Mehmet does for a living. So if we want to explore that, see what they do, then it's something we could probably come back. So that's basically, we're deferring the meeting because you need further information. That's one of the reasons why you can defer a planning application decision.
Councillor Blokey.
Just very quickly on this, because I think we're coming to a decision. Again, if I've understood this correctly, we have a statement from the applicant that says the requirement is that the person who initially occupies the dwelling has had significant input into the design. We've had a statement that the applicant has had input into the design. I think, if I understand Councillor Mehmet, what we don't have is a mechanism that assures that the applicant is the initial occupant, because they could sell before it's built and someone else could build it. I think that's the specific area we probably need additional guidance on.
Okay, fair enough. So we had a recommendation from Councillor Mehmet regarding the establishment of a mechanism to define self-build in practice, and in practice in the context of this application. Can I just check that we have a seconder for that? And that's Councillor Hoskins. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is to take a roll call on a vote on that motion. So if we can go down that road, Sally. Thank you.
So members are now voting on the motion to defer this application as proposed by Councillor Mehmet and seconded by Councillor Hoskins. And when I call your name, please can you indicate whether you are for, against, or abstain this motion? Councillor King?
Against.
Councillor Upwell?
For.
Councillor Barton?
For.
Councillor Bridge?
For.
Councillor Clokey?
For.
Councillor Cope?
For.
Councillor Hoskins?
For.
Councillor Mehmet?
For.
Councillor Oliver?
For.
Councillor Perry?
For.
Councillor Pilgrim?
For.
Councillor Rhodes?
Against.
Councillor Tunstall?
For.
We have 11 members voted in favour, 2 members voted against. The motion is carried.
Councillor Rhodes.
From the officers, could we just be advised as to now we are likely to suffer from non-determination?
When an application has we have I'll speak actually, Josh. Do we have an EOT on this one to a certain point? But once we get past that EOT, if another one isn't secured, then the councillors risk at non-determination. Correct.
Thank you. Based on that recommendation, the decision on this application is deferred, so we'll move on to the next item. Thank you. Councillor Mehmet, good night. The next application is for the Vicarage, Church Street, Tonbridge. I'm going to ask Charlotte to do a presentation of the application before we proceed? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my presentation now. This application seeks planning permission for the subdivision of the site at the vicarage and the erection of a new 1.5-storey, 3-bedroom detached dwelling house in the rear garden of the vicarage. The proposed dwelling would be accessed from Church Street via a new driveway running parallel with the southern boundary of the site. Planning permission has been granted for the same scheme 4 times previously, in 2012, 2014, 2017 and 2020. And significant weight has been attributed to this fact in the assessment of this planning application. During the course of this application, the red boundary line of the site was corrected so that it now accurately corresponds with the land ownership of the site. This has resulted in the boundary along the southern part of the site widening from 4 metres to 8 metres in width. This correction has allowed the access driveway to be moved further away from the boundary of New Court to the south to enable the retention of the existing copper beech tree and cherry laurel tree to the southwest of the site. However, there are no other material differences between this scheme and the previously consented schemes, and there have been no material changes in planning policy or the local context since the previous plan permissions were granted. The site is located within the urban confines of Tunbridge, within the Tunbridge Conservation Area. It borders the Grade 2 listed dwelling house of the Cedars to the east, the Grade 2 star listed Church of St Peter and St Paul's to the north, and the Grade 2 listed church boundary wall to the north. The scheduled ancient monument of the medieval town wall, known as the Fosse, runs along the eastern boundary of the site. A post-war block of flats known as New Court is situated to the south of the site. This drawing is the proposed site plan for the southern part of the site, which includes the new access driveway. As already mentioned, the driveway has been moved further to the north, where it meets the vicarage car park, to allow for the retention of the existing copper beech and cherry laurel trees. Recommencement conditions are recommended for the submission and approval of details of tree protection, levels and the excavation of services to ensure that all trees shown to be retained are protected. Neighbours have objected to the loss of car parking within the existing private car park serving the church to facilitate the access driveway to the proposed dwelling. The majority of the car park falls outside the red line, but remains within the ownership of the site. The access driveway would result in the loss of 2 car parking spaces within the car park. This has been established in previous consents. Whilst this may be considered significant to local residents, this is a private car park and reduction in spaces could not be substantiated as a reason for refusal. This is the full proposed site plan, which shows the location of the proposed dwelling adjacent to the existing building at the vicarage, as well as the proposed first floor plan. The proposed dwelling would provide a good standard of accommodation for future occupiers, and the proposal would not result in undue harm to the amenity of neighbouring residents. The proposed dwelling would sit comfortably within the site and would be surrounded by hard and soft landscaping, the details of which would be secured by condition. The proposed dwelling would provide a good standard of accommodation for future occupiers, and the proposal would not result in undue harm to the amenity of neighbouring residents. The proposed dwelling would sit comfortably within the site and would be surrounded by hard and soft landscaping, the details of which would be secured by condition.
Here are the proposed front and western side elevations of the proposed dwelling house. The dwelling would have low eaves and would be of a contemporary design constructed from red orange brick and black weatherboarding, with PV panels to the roof and some elements of pre-weathered zinc cladding to the single-storey projections. The submission and approval of details and samples of the proposed materials would be secured by condition. And here are the proposed rear and eastern side elevations of the proposed dwelling. Okay, I'm going to share some photos of the site now. This is a view of the site looking east as viewed from the rear garden of the vicarage. The fosse is located straight ahead and is covered by dense vegetation. Pre-commencement conditions for the submission and approval of a programme of archaeological work and details of all below ground excavations would be secured to ensure the remains of the fosse are protected. This image shows the northern corner of the site taken from the same spot. This view is looking north towards the church boundary wall with the church beyond. This is a view looking south from within the site towards the rear of the vicarage. Here is a view of the copper beech tree that is now proposed to be retained, looking southwest from the location of the proposed access driveway. Finally, this view shows the access to the site, an existing car park from Church Street, which will be retained as a shared access. As already stated, the access driveway would result in the loss of 2 car parking spaces within the unmarked private car park. The location of the entrance to the access driveway would allow the retention of the space adjacent to the southern boundary with New Court. The copper beech is also visible in this view. Overall, officers are satisfied with the proposals and consider that the development would not cause undue harm, which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme in terms of the provision of 1 new dwelling house. Officers consider that significant weight has been given to the fact that plan permission has been granted for the same development 4 times before. It is therefore recommended that the application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. We're now going to come to the speakers, and I believe Vivian Branson is online. Vivian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Please carry on, Vivian, and you have the usual 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Area 1, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I spoke against this application the last time it came to committee, which was quite a few years ago, and nothing has changed with the application to make me change my mind. I am concerned about the effect on the conservation area and the security of the scheduled ancient monument, the fosse, which is the medieval town wall. As in the 2012 report, I am particularly concerned about building works at the top of the fosse and whether this would lead to possible erosion. In 2012, historic specialists from Natural England considered that the proposed development is disproportionately large in relation to plot size, particularly when considered in the context of the conservation area. 6.15 of the current report, the officer states the proposals would preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area, which is of course complete nonsense. Now the area is a settlement of well-spaced buildings within a green space. At 1, we are told the development will be required to reflect the local distinctiveness, etc., etc. This development of a barn-type structure, zinc horizontal panels and carports can in no way be accused of reflecting the local distinctiveness. I know that the barn at the entrance to the car park of the Rose and Crown is being used as a reason to erect this barn structure, but the quality of the existing far outweighs the proposed. The Conservation Officer in July 2020 suggests that the design of the house is revisited to be more appropriate to its setting. At 3.3, I note the report mentions the Cedars, but not the Grade 2 listed building or the garden of the Hermitage, whose boundary within the application is narrower than that with the Cedars and worryingly nearer to the SAM. The fosse appears to be a rather delicate mud bank, which could be easily harmed by the development proposed in such a close proximity. At 5.4, Kent Archaeology recommends Historic England is consulted. Has this been done? 6.11 states that 4 previous applications have been approved and impact on designated heritage assets was not a reason to refuse the applications. However, what I don't understand is that the Conservation Officer was consulted in 2020 and advised that this application would result in harm to the conservation area, but the officer...
Vivian, I've got to call you short. Thank you.
I finished.
Thank you. Well done. I'd like to call Mr. George Gilbert Smith, please.
Chair and councillors, my name is George Gilbert Smith and I'm a long-standing member of the Tunbridge Parish Church community. I note that the first item on page 50, paragraph 5.6, actually is this particular objection to the car park, which is the substance of my address to you now. Note also, please, paragraph 6.36 on page 57. Actually, the second sentence of that is not a sentence, and I would value some clarification as to exactly what that means. It does say, however, that there are 2 parking spaces will be lost. In fact, if you looked at the diagram which the officer showed us, which showed a view of the car park through the gate, you can clearly see that there are 3 cars parked in those spaces. I would also contend that there is regularly 1 car parked against the wall, and that the widening of the access to the car park from Church Street will certainly result in the loss of at least 1 other car parking space. I would therefore maintain that the true figure is much more likely to be 5 or even 6 out of a car park which at present only contains about 14, at the very most 14 spaces. Who will this affect is my main draft of what I want to say. The main people who will be affected by this are disabled people who can't get to church as a result, and the not so well off who now will not want to be paying regular car park charges for church on Sundays. However, it's not only restricting the people who regularly worship at the church, because the church itself is used by non-church-based groups on a weekly basis, and the car park is frequently full already at its present capacity to overflowing many times a week. So these groups, as well as non-church going users for the church for weddings and funerals, will also be severely disadvantaged, even from the point of discouraging from attending such things as weddings and funerals. I would therefore anticipate complaints from the community if this application receives council approval. So, and I would also foresee, as there is no clear boundary between the actual driveway, which would be used by the occupants of the future building, that there will be difficulties between them and the people using the car park. Finally, we saw a new diagram that I've not ever seen so far today, which is now a curved driveway, which appears to go into the middle of the present car park and not at the extreme edge, as is the proposal you've seen between the red lines which have clearly been shown. I think we need more clarification about this before this planning application.
Thank you, Mr. Gilbert Smith. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Robert Wickham, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. 5 quick points. There's been reference to the landscaping and the trees. We've been asked to preserve the Copper Beech. That's why we made a variation on the application, that we can preserve it. And the laurel. I would enlarge on that first point, though. Along the southern edge, if you look at it, most of the stuff has died over the last few years. There will be a landscaping scheme, so there will be actually again trees on the diversity thing increase value considerably. and that needs replanting and properly setting out. As I say, stuff's died. It's only one home. Second point, that is a material consideration. The diocese, I'm planning it's under this diocese and several others. We had a decision in this a few weeks ago. The inspector said the benefit of one additional dwelling I called moderate weight. And that's fair. Every house is important. Third point, car parking. Well, I know the site well. I've visited many times, and I have never seen both the Kinnings Row car park off Bourdyke and this car park full to overflowing. I don't see a problem here. With the new arrangement, I think there will be 2 lost, but it will be possible to park up on the southern side. So you may even improve that. Fourth point, NPPF accepts paragraphs 200 to 211, the merits of additional dwellings, new buildings within conservation areas to a high standard of design. And my colleague who's doing this is a national design award winner. And the last point mentioned before, it's been consented 4 times before. So I don't see any reasons that could be substantiated to refuse it. My only criticism of my clients is I hope they actually get on and do it this time. But that is our determination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wickham. I'm minded to come to Councillor Cope as the local member.
Thank you. And Robert would also like to speak after me, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I wanted to thank all the officers who have been barraged by queries from me over the many, I was going to say weeks, but actually I think we can say months now that this has been brewing. I also would just like to contest Mr. Wickham's point that much of the down the side is dead. We have actually visited the site, and I did see quite a lot of thriving biodiversity along that side of the site. The large amount of public responses on this proposal show the strength of feeling about this, and I know that it is a space that has been valued and loved for its importance to the community, not only for people attending church, as one of our speakers said, but also people at toddler group, brownies, play groups. I mean, myself and my children have been beneficiaries of it. So I do know how this area has been valued and is important. Beyond this, the garden at the moment does provide this rich array of trees and wildlife. It's great that the work has been done to make sure that the Copper Beech and the Laurel would be preserved. But I do think our worries about badgers and the delicacy of the foss do need to be taken into consideration. The development is also situated in the conservation area. And I know at 6.2.7, it's not considered to be harmful in terms of design terms, but I would contest it doesn't seem to add much to the area, nor does it seem in keeping with the design in the houses around Bourdyke or the street opposite with the terrace houses and anything else in the surrounding area. I think it's also important that we do discuss this development this evening, even after we've had the extensive discussion on Douglas Road, because if we look at the public feedback, I know people feel incredibly strongly about this, and it's part of the important democratic process that we have a chance to discuss what is important to people in the ward and in the borough more widely. So I am going to hand over to my colleague Robert, but I would like councillors to really consider hard the points that are being raised. Thank you.
Councillor,
I haven't really got much to add to Anna. Just to say generally, it's not a great development for Tunbridge as a whole, and the negatives seem to outweigh the positives. You've got the negative of the visual impact on the conservation area. That's one clear thing, I think. Secondly, there's a negative impact on heritage assets. There's a loss of habitat. There's an impact on biodiversity. There's a loss of a space where people had social gatherings. There's a loss of the car parking spaces. There's just an awful lot of negatives about this development, and it's all just for one housing unit.
Thank you. Charlotte and Hannah in combination to respond.
Thank you, Chair. So to start with, in terms of the protection of the foss, KCC Archaeology have been consulted on it and have confirmed that they are happy that the proposal is acceptable with these two pre-commencement conditions that they've recommended and have been added to the draft decision. Historic England were consulted on the original application back in 2012, and they did not raise any objections, and they said that it can be decided in terms of local and national policy by officers. I'm unsure if they were consulted with this application, as it actually came in April last year when we had a different IT system, so that hasn't carried across, but they certainly haven't commented on this one. But if they did, my understanding that their recommendation would be the same as before, that we assess it in terms of our own local and local guidance, and that is what KCC Archaeology have commented on. In terms of badgers, there is a potential badger set on site, and as such, KCC Ecology have been consulted, and they've confirmed that they would want a condition to be added to confirm that within 3 months prior to commencement of the development, an on-site walkover is carried out. And if a badger set is found to be there, then mitigation measures are put in place. This has been, again, added to the draft decision. And in terms of biodiversity, this application was submitted prior to the mandatory biodiversity net gain. However, the MPPF recommends that all applications do demonstrate an uplift in biodiversity, and so a condition has been added to this for ecological enhancements on the site to improve the biodiversity, and it's generally recommended that it's 1% uplift for these applications that were prior to mandatory BNG. So there wouldn't be a loss in biodiversity through this application. In terms of the parking, it would only be 2 parking spaces that would be lost. As I showed in that image, and as the agent Robert Wickham said in his deputation, the space that is already there adjacent to the southern boundary of the site next to the new court would be retained. There wouldn't be any actual physical separation between the car park and the new dwelling. So whilst there is required to be space for them to get into this new access driveway, which would be 2 cars width, this is the same as what was approved under the previous 4 applications. Yeah, the car park itself as well is an unmarked car park. It could I think it potentially holds about 15 spaces, so it would be the loss of 2 spaces, with still 13 spaces there, and officers are happy that with that number, that loss, as it's only the same as what has been previously granted. In terms of impact on the conservation area, points have been raised about the Conservation Officer's objection to the 2020 application. So in the 2020 application, the Conservation Officer offered a view that they did not think that the proposals they felt the proposals harmed the character and appearance of the conservation area. However, the officer at the time did not share this view, and they considered that it was a high quality development, high quality design, albeit contemporary. It does draw from the surrounding area. The surrounding area is a mixed character. But as has been highlighted, there is that building on the corner of the Rose and Crown, which has a weatherboard style finish. This would be the dwelling would be visible probably from the footpath along the church, but yet the materials and the finish are to be conditioned to make sure that it is high quality and that the colours of the materials match well with the existing building of the vicarage, and that it blends in well. And officers of this application also consider that it would not harm the character and appearance of the conservation area, nor of any surrounding listed buildings. Is there anything else I've missed?
All I want to reiterate is that this application has been granted 4 times. As members are aware, that if we were to refuse it on something that we had previously considered acceptable, which we have in this case, then we would be at risk of costs for bringing something in at this stage. We have no policy and guidance hasn't changed significantly at all. We're in the same development plan as we previously were when these were all granted. So I just want to draw members' attention to the fact that if we refuse it on something that we have already viewed as acceptable, that would be unsubstantiated. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I just want to back that up based on some advice from my learned friend on the left here, that we have to be conscious of the fact that this is an extant and recently expired permission. In fact, it's been granted permission at least 3 times. But we have had at least 2 site visits, and that we're very conscious of the tree line, which we are aiming to preserve, and the applicant has made adjustments to that. And that obviously has some impacts on the car park, which, as I understand it, is a privately owned unit. So you can make of that whatever, but I'll open it up to further discussion. I've got Councillor Rhodes first, and then Councillor Lakey.
Chairman, thank you.
Sorry, beg pardon.
Chairman, thank you. To us, sitting on this side of the table, the design, of course, is subjective, but officers are happy with it. I mean, to me, who let them build that science block at Tunbridge School? But there you go. It was a shame in 2020 that a few bricks weren't put down and maybe even a curb, Chairman. Can I just ask, in all seriousness, about an informative? It's only an informative, I know. But number 3, are we really insisting on sprinkler systems in new buildings like this in a private house? Thank you.
Councillor Clokey.
Yes, just a relatively small point. Obviously, we've got some conditions recommended by KCC Archaeology to perform an archaeological survey and to get details signed off of excavation works. Clearly, we want to ensure there's no damage to the scheduled ancient monument. Would it be reasonable, I'm hoping it would be relatively non-onerous, to also require that a report submitted to us before commencement of building detailing how they're going to ensure or mitigate against risk of damage to the ancient monument during construction?
Thank you. Anna, is that a reasonable condition or is that an existing condition?
In setting at the moment, we've got No development other than demolition of buildings. Yeah, we have already got conditions on, so no development other than demolition of any buildings, or removal of hard standing ground, investigation or site work shall take place until the applicant and the agent or successor entitled has secured the implementation of a programme of archaeological work in accordance with written specification and timetable, which has been submitted and approved by the local planning authority. So we've got, yeah, if everyone looks to conditions 4 and 5, they are on this already. If we were to do a pre-commencement, we would need to get written authority from the applicant to do that. But yeah, and they've agreed to these conditions already.
Yeah. So my question on that specifically was that these conditions ensure that archaeological surveys do none, and it ensures that they put in a report to ensure that it's not damaged by excavation. But I'm just wondering, can that be enhanced to make sure it's also not damaged by like incidental work during construction? You know, no one accidentally backs a digger onto something. I mean, I'm pretty sure they don't want to damage the fosse.
I can look at the condition and possibly strengthen it to include specifically say that should be fine, that no damage. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Rhodes had a point about sprinklers.
It was only an informative, and I think that has also been carried on from previous consents, and it is only guidance that they're not required to do it. It's just advisable by the fire brigade.
Councillor Parry, please.
Thanks, Chair. This was just a point about the car park. I do understand people's concern about the loss of any car parking spaces, especially when they're free, and then what they give to people, disabled and people on lower income and things. But I'm curious what jurisdiction we have over a private car park when something like this happens, especially, and as I understand that this car park is owned by the applicant. I mean, do we have any rights to enforce anything or make any comment about the loss of the car park spaces? Thanks.
I mean, it's a private car park. It generally falls outside the private the planning remit about what is done there. I mean, it's established there as a use for the church for a number of years, and it was already been agreed, as we keep saying, that it's been 2 spaces have been lost. But yeah, it's generally outside the planning remit about what a person does with a private car park.
Councillor Cope.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just confirm that, Joy, your advice is that as this has been approved 4 times, that we are in very sort of shaky ground for any objections? Just to clarify before saying anything else. Thank you.
Yeah, so I was just going to, I'll say that there's a lot of case law supporting this, and it's actually in government guidance on appeals, in the appeals section. And that's what I was reading out to Councillor King. What types of behaviour may give rise to a substantive award against a local planning authority? So it says local planning authorities are at risk of an award of costs if they behave unreasonably. And then it gives examples of that. And one of the examples are failing to grant a further planning permission for a scheme that is the subject of an extant or recently expired permission where there has been no material change in circumstance.
Thank you for being so clear. So just so I am publicly saying this, I understand that there's very little in this situation I can do that doesn't risk a financial penalty to the council.
That's what I would advise, because I can't see any material change in circumstances. It's the same application we received quite a few times, and they've actually made some concessions.
Thank you for being so clear. Thank you.
Do we have anyone else that wishes to speak? Okay, well, based on the fact that the recommendations are laid out on page 62, paragraph 7, and all of the conditions, reasons and informatives are set out, I haven't heard any substantive reasons to reject this application. So we can either go for approving on the basis of general affirmation, or I can go to an individual vote. We will go for a vote.
Subject to myself delegated from the chair and yourselves to check that condition regarding the works to the fosse.
We will take that as confirmed that Hannah will do that work based on the recommendation or based on the approval of the committee. But we'll now go to a vote, Sally. Thank you. I will vote moving the recommendation to approve. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Cope.
Members are now voting on approving this planning application with the enhanced condition that the officers are going to investigate. When I call your name, please, can you confirm that whether you are for, against, or abstain? Motion. Councillor King.
For.
Councillor Afwell.
For.
Councillor Barton.
For.
Councillor Bridge.
For.
Councillor Colloquy.
For.
Councillor Cope.
Against.
Councillor Hoskins.
For.
Councillor Oliver. Councillor Perry.
Against.
Councillor Pilgrim.
For.
Councillor Rose.
For.
Councillor Tunstall.
For.
We have 9 members voted in favour, 3 members voted against. The proposal is carried.
Thank you, Sally. Moving on, I've already dealt with item 8. So moving on to item 9, I have no urgent business, so I propose that the meeting is closed at 9:25. Thank you all for your time.